My name is Reto Meier, and welcome to Ask the Experts for Advanced Android App Development. We're going to spend a little bit of time today talking about what the course is, why we think you should be interested in it, go ahead and answer questions that you guys sent in. I'd like to introduce you to some of the people who are behind the course, who you'll see on camera. We've got Dan Galpin, Joanna Smith, and Ian. So we're going to ask you guys a little bit about this course. I'm going to start with you, Dan. Could you tell me a little bit about the motivation behind building advanced app development?
Sure. I mean, there were a lot of things that we covered in depth in the first class. But for this class, we really wanted to focus on the things that help, that take an application from that 90%, ready to, with all the functionality there, to something that's actually ready to publish on something like Google Play. You get in front of users. And we also wanted to cover a bunch of material that we didn't have time to cover in the first class. And so to do that, we thought, all right, build a whole bunch of small applications, and we're going to demonstrate each component that we didn't get to. And we realized that what we really wanted to do was to actually take what we had in the first course, which is this weather app named Sunshine, and really take it to the next level. Really take it to something that we felt was polished, that we felt represented what Android applications should be today. And it allowed us to introduce a whole bunch of things like material design. It allowed us to introduce a whole bunch of new concepts in terms of Android. And basically, we realized we were able to get through a lot of the new material without needing another application. Meanwhile, the people who taken the first class were already familiar with it. They weren't building a new application. And, and finally, we really wanted to make sure that we kept a lot of the fun tone from the original. And so I think that I hope you'll see when you take the class, we've really kept a nice balance between getting through a whole bunch of new material and still keeping the class kind of light and interesting.
That's great. And Joanna, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's actually included in amongst all of the fun?
Fun's hard to beat. Learning. That's all. It's about learning. So for that, we actually kind of took two different umbrellas, really. One is things that already existed in the app that we wanted to make better, maybe checking some better error cases, updating the design, like Dan said, adding accessibility and performance checks. And then the other was new features that we thought really rounded out to make it a compelling part of the marketplace as opposed to another app. And so to do that, we introduced libraries, so you can see how to add new features, but also how to use a library to access better services, like Google Cloud Messaging and location through the Google repository and those services. So we tried to reach out to a lot of different things that we thought would really, round it out. And then at the very end, we tell you how to actually publish an app and put it in the Play Store. So I think it's everything you would need to know to get your first app out there.
That's fantastic. And Ian, I think this is part of the Android degree program. Right. Can you tell us a little bit about how this fits into that course?
Yeah, so this app for the first class, developing Android apps. That class is specifically designed for people who maybe have some programming knowledge but don't have knowledge of Android. While this class, this comes after it, kind of assumes you already know some of the basics of Android development, but want to go kind of more in depth.
So you'd recommend doing them in that order then?
Yeah, definitely start kind of with developing Android apps and then move on to this class. But the other part of it is then we tried kind of a survey kind of approach so that by the time you're done taking this class, you have kind of a good idea of what the other classes in the Nano degree, like the material design class, ubiquitous computing class, and the other ones actually have in store. You know which ones are actually really engaging, and you really like that section, or maybe you want to take at a later point.
They're all really engaging. Let's just make that clear.
Well, some more so than others.
Where's our data there, of course?
Yeah, you can't just say that.
You gotta start somewhere.
Like, we had to the point where this grade would actually start them 5 minutes in advance because it would always drop out, and we'd start it again on time.
Yeah, exciting.
What's causing
I think,
Should we like have
I think
visual?
that's a good way to do it. I think we should just.
Keep doing the intro for an hour.
Yeah.
Well, people will
Hi.
drop off, come on, they'll seem fresh forever.
Well, welcome to Ask the Experts. Here,
Again.
here
Oh
we
yeah,
are
I
in-
noticed that. You don't say K's very strongly.
No. I'm an Australian. There's a lot of letters I don't say very strongly.
I just noticed when you were going, I was like, okay.
Wow, I didn't
Ask the expert.
ask the experts.
All right, we're done.
More minutes, guys. Thank you so much for your patience. Maybe just take a swig of water or something.
All reach at the same time.
This episode of Google Developers Live is sponsored by Crystal Magic.
Is that what's in your bottle?
Got the moderator bottle.
You need to get looser as the day goes on.
Yeah, exactly.
We're a sixth of the way done.
Eating up the time nicely.
This is very.
Well, no time for questions.
Sorry.
We did the
No
intro
more
3
questions.
times.
In our Q&A, we don't need questions.
Yeah, that's right.
Ask the
Welcome to Listen to the Experts.
Well, not even that.
Not even that.
Welcome to Watch the
Welcome
Experts.
to Watch the Experts.
So in summary,
Okay, you turning it back on? Let us know.
We'll stay quiet. So you can give me sound again. Give me sound. It's quiet again. JP, do you hear any weirdness? Okay. I think we should be able to do. You could do that maybe in this computer.
Okay.
Okay, Liz, ready?
Yep.
And taking ready.
hey everyone, my name's Reto Meier. We apologize for our technical difficulties. Hopefully we have them all sorted out and we'll be able to start again. We do plan to take some questions from you guys. This is Ask the Experts for Advanced Android App Development. I'm going to start by introducing our panel. We've got Dan Galpin, Joanna Smith, and Ian Lake. And we're going to start by talking a little bit about why we built the course, what we think you can get out of it, and some of what we've got included in there. So hopefully this time you'll actually be able to hear us as we give you some of the answers. So I'll start with you, Dan. Can you tell us a little bit about the motivations behind building the Advanced Android App Development course?
Sure. I mean, when we built the original course, we realized we couldn't get through all of the core material that involved the Android platform. There's just so much out there. We picked the most important pieces, but we realized there were still a bunch of things we left out. And so we wanted to make sure we got to all of those, and a bunch of things that are really core to developers as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we realized, as we were thinking about how to put this into a class, our first conception was, let's make a whole bunch of small applications. We'll have a little application to demonstrate this element and a little application to demonstrate this element. And then it hit us that probably the most important thing to an Android developer is actually getting a polished application. And by building all these little applications, we were never going to have anything that had the kind of polish that users expect from a really solid Android application. It allows us to get into some great topics like animation, for example, which we didn't cover, and also making the application better through better tablet layouts. And so that was a huge change for us. And then in terms of the class, we wanted to keep it a little bit more technical in some ways in the original class. We wanted to give the students a little bit more leeway to make mistakes. It's not quite as much of a guided experience, but at the same time, it really brings through a whole bunch of these critical elements of the platform. Plus, the platform itself is moving. So we actually were able to cover a whole bunch of things that were in the L release of Android, in this update. So it's kind of a whole bunch of things. And then as far as the tone of the class, we wanted to keep it light and fun, just like the original class. Probably even more fun because we're covering a different set of material, and we had a great time putting the class together.
Fantastic. And Joanna, can you tell us a little bit more about what's actually in the class?
Right. So you can kind of think of it as falling under two different umbrellas. The first is the idea of cleaning up things that were already in Sunshine, thinking about a couple more error cases, or covering accessibility and performance, which were never even mentioned in the first place, which is kind of not so great. And then we have this other umbrella where we try to go over new features, right? And this is actually where we bring out libraries and how to use a library to kind of build out more options for your users, or how to use a library to access other services that have already been written for you. So we actually show off Google Cloud Messaging and the Places API through our Google services, which can really allow you to customize a lot of things without putting in a lot of development time. We also teach widgets, and we go over an entire design overhaul. So I think it's going to show everything that a user needs to know. And by user, of course, I mean developer, because our users are you guys. And then at the very end, we'll tell you how to publish it, put it in a Play Store, and you'll have everything you need to put your first app out there.
It sounds like a really sort of practical guide to, you already know Android, now you know how to build a real app.
Exactly.
Yeah? Fantastic. And this is part of the nano degree, right? So Ian, can you tell us a little bit about how this fits into that broader degree course?
That's right. It's all part of the Android Nano degree. And so this is kind of the second course in the series. The Developing Android Apps was kind of built specifically for people who maybe have some development experience, but don't necessarily have Android experience. While this course, because it comes afterwards, kind of assumes you know some of the Android stuff, at least enough to get something working. Yeah. But then really kind of goes more in depth on really productionizing your app. At the same point, like, it kind of serves as an introduction to all the other topics that we're covering in later parts of the nano degree. So things like the material design class, as well as ubiquitous computing and stuff. This course kind of acts as a survey of all those things so that you really kind of know what things you might be interested in trying out first after you've taken this class.
Fantastic. So would you say that when you're looking at the course or the nano degree overall, can you sort of pick and choose the parts you want based on how much experience you have and the things that you have interest in, or is it really a thing you should do from start to finish?
Right, yeah. These first two courses are very much kind of the foundation of the nano degree, the Developing Android Apps and then this Advanced Android App Development. But after that, you can definitely kind of branch out and choose kind of just the subjects you're really interested in to kind of more focus in on one of those areas. Like, obviously, they're all really good courses to take. You'll get a lot of knowledge out of them, but you may prioritize some things. Like if you really like the design part of things, right? The material design one's going to be really good for you to kind of get started with and kind of really get your app that much better.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so we've got a few questions which have been pulled from around the place. Hopefully we'll be able to get some from the live stream as well. The first one I've got here is, how much Java should I know to take this course? I know the basics of Java. Is that enough for me to get started? Who wants to take that? Dan?
It's certainly enough for you to get started. I mean, I think that you'll certainly end up absorbing a lot of new Java knowledge. You're going to want to make sure that you are going and looking up things. If you aren't familiar with threading, for example, well, I mean, again, if you've taken the first course, if you've gone, then you're going to have learned all of this. If you're concerned about your Java knowledge, of course, we have a beginning course, which actually is intended for people with no programming knowledge or minimal programming knowledge. So you can actually start there, and that might be worthwhile. But for this course, by the time you get to advanced Android, the assumption is that you have a lot of Java experience. So because you've already taken the first class.
I would say to add on to that, we take the approach of you've done a little bit of Android and we have a lot we want to teach you, but we want you to kind of figure out some of the nitty-gritty of it. So if you aren't comfortable figuring out how something works by going to the documentation and reading that, then you're probably not comfortable enough with Java. But if you figured out how to look things up on your own to solve your own little minor problems or to figure out the syntax, then I think you're going to be okay.
Okay, great. So it's really, you're looking for anyone who's sort of comfortable with the syntax. They're not having to try and figure out how to do basic things, but maybe haven't written professionally in Java for a while.
That should be fine.
Yeah, you should at least be comfortable in the languages. I think in this course especially, we've taken a little bit, some more of a hands-off kind of an approach where, like, we're going to talk through the things you need to know, but then a lot of what you're actually learning, you're going to have to look up some things and try and figure out how the pieces all fit together. And we're here to help you along the way.
Yeah. I mean, one of the most important things I think any of these classes can teach you is how to use online resources in order to solve your problems. So we're going to, part of what we do is we try to guide you to those resources. We put links inside of our instructor notes in the class to say, hey, here's where you can look to actually figure out how to solve this problem. So if it wasn't enough, if the video wasn't enough to get you exactly where you need to go, or it may not even be designed to do that, here's where you actually can go to implement what we're suggesting.
Great. So it sounds a lot like, if you're comfortable trying and failing and learning and growing at the same time as all the rest of it, then you've got the right amount of knowledge, but you're not going to get sort of handheld the entire way through and every element of Java syntax explained.
Yeah, absolutely not.
And of course, we have other courses, and Udacity has an Intro to Java class and stuff like that. So There are certainly classes that'll help you better prepare for coming into this class. You don't need to come in before you're ready, kind of a thing. But
I guess that's the thing as well. It's all self-paced, right?
Yeah,
so you can go a little more slowly if you're not as comfortable, and buzz through it quite quickly if you already know some of the concepts. Fantastic. All right, another question. What was the reason you included Google Cloud messaging specifically into the course? Has it changed or somehow become more important in the last year? Like, why was, of all the libraries, all the things you could have introduced, why Google Cloud messaging?
Okay, so this is I'm going to take this one only because
You
it
can
was
take it.
sort of my fault, and because Google Cloud Messaging is really about doing back-end services, and we're not teaching a course in back-end services. But one of our hugest focuses in Android is battery life, and the second focus, of course, is keeping your app timely. And these things battle each other. You know, if you want to have timely information in your application and you want to have really great battery life for your phone, you have to make sure that you are getting data from your service as as minimally as possible. And really, Google Cloud Messaging is the key to all of that. So we really want to make sure that people understand how important it is to protect the battery life of the device. And so we've made this an important part of the course. It really, really is huge. You know, everyone, if you are writing a backend service and you can take advantage of cloud messaging, please do. We couldn't actually take advantage of it in our app because we didn't write the backend.
I came up with a wonderful fake server. All
Yeah.
right? It is a beautiful fake server.
Well,
But-
and if you think about like a weather app, right? Like things like notifications and stuff, especially for like severe weather, like make a lot of sense, right? It's not necessarily as much about like all right, well, we have a server, we need to push stuff through, but it's the same type of knowledge, the same core building blocks that you can then apply to different situations in the future, right?
Absolutely.
Just because we choose one approach doesn't mean that same building block can't be used for other things.
And if you're building a fake weather server, California's a great place to do it because you only need to return one value. It's fantastic.
The value return is actually pretty funny. So when you guys get to it,
Yeah, exactly. It's part of the comedy. You know, there's an enormous amount of comedy in Joanna's class. So you have to get to those comic bits. It's worth going through the class just for those moments.
Would you recommend learning Android specifically to be able to see
Yes,
Joanna's
absolutely. Yeah, I think that Joanna has another career should she want it.
Don't tell her that. Dude.
Android.
Sorry.
Android development. Right?
Android developer.
That's the thing you're good at, please. So, I've got another question here from someone who is taking a few other Udacity courses, and they're thinking about taking this course. He's wondering if by the end of this course, will he be able to write apps that look like material design? So, how far along in the material design train do we go in this course?
Okay,
I'll
so
let you go last.
yeah.
Ian, why
Well,
don't you kick us off?
to be honest, there's a lot to material design, right? Like it was a total rehaul of how Android apps look.
It's a significant change, yeah.
I would say significance, probably a little bit of an understatement. And we go through a lot in this course, right? Like I think Dan spent an inordinate amount of time talking about material design for a good reason, because it actually makes the app look a ton better. If you compare kind of where Sunshine or Weather App ended in ANFUN 1 to where it ends at the end of this class, it's leaps and bounds better, right? So we go through a lot of the basics, a lot of the things you need to know. But at the same point, like we do have a whole other course specifically on it.
So there is a lot out there, and there's a lot of different features. But the main thing that we're trying to impress upon people is that you should be designing your app for magic moments, and material design is what enables you to do that visually very easily. So little moments of glee and anticipation where your users are like, oh my gosh, that was fun, without even necessarily thinking that is what's going to get the user coming back to your app as opposed to downloading a different version.
Yeah, so it sounds like this is kind of more of an introduction, like a teaser almost
Yeah.
into what is possible.
So what I was going to say is that we'll teach you how to code things up, but the problem is that you need a designer to make things look like material design. So it's not about coding things so they look like material design. It's about being able to take a design that is beautiful in material and code it up. And I think that you'll be able to do that to a very, very large degree after this class. But we don't teach you in huge detail how to actually design your app to look like a material app.
Which is a huge part of it, right?
Right, and that's why we have a whole other class. I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. Is that not everyone is a designer. Not everyone wants to be a designer. I think that everyone should understand the basics of design. Everyone should try to be as much of a designer as they can. But the truth is, that might not be the track you want to go down in the nano degree. You might need to say, what, design is not my thing. I want to do back-end services. I want to work on
Gradle.
I want to work with
Data
Gradle.
layers.
Exactly.
Data layers.
And so that's why we've divided the nano degree up that way.
Makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like it's almost a similar answer in a way to the Google Cloud messaging, where it's like these are all things that most real-world apps are going to need: a way to talk to a server, a way to present things which looks modern and delightful to its users. So this is sort of the starting point, and then you can go off and dig into a little bit more detail, which actually leads in really well to the next question, which is, after I complete this course, what should I do next to continue towards becoming a top-notch Android developer? So not just a regular Android developer, but top-notch.
Top-notch.
Yeah. Joanna, why don't you give us your opinion? What do you think?
I find it funny that you're asking me when you wrote the book on Android.
Yeah, but you're the top-notch.
I'm the top-notch. I think honestly, the biggest thing you can do to become a really exceptional developer is to develop. To try to make an app, get that first step out there, listen to your users' feedback, read the comments that you're getting, have beta test groups, and then iterate. The more and more you play with things, the more you try, and the more you have metrics and engagement that you're looking at within your app. If you're using analytics to see what's being successful and what's not, then you're going to be able to learn a lot on the go. We can only do so much by telling you how things work. You have to figure out what works best for you and what you're trying to accomplish with your feature set.
Makes sense. I mean, that's what you guys are kind of doing in this course, is building a real app, and it sounds like that's kind of what you need to do to figure out how to build things really well, is to have that experience.
Absolutely. Part of the nano degree is building projects. So as you go through these individual classes, there are not just these guided sessions, but there's also projects we expect you to finish, and it's so important. And my feeling is, try to find something you're passionate about and build an app around that, whether that's working with a local nonprofit and saying, hey, I'm going to do something cool for you, or a local business. Let's get your feet wet somehow and try to build something useful, or for yourself. And there's so many opportunities out there. So many organizations would love to have an Android application. It's really a good opportunity for you to really dig in and spend a few months, which is what it's going to take to get confident in all of this.
Have each of you built, like, outside of the Android nano degree, have each of you actually gone ahead and built a real app for your own sake, or for a nonprofit or other government agency?
So I mean, I've built a couple of different applications in my illustrious career. Yeah, I mean, the first application that I ever built for Android was an application that we built actually that shipped on phones all over the Sprint network. Yeah. And so it wasn't after I took the course, though. This was before. This is when we were still talking about early versions. It wasn't last week. And so I kind of went to go through that, and it was what got me excited about Android in the first place. Actually, was going in and building a real app and going through all of the fun of Android 1.1 and 1.
You got started late.
Yeah, exactly. I did. I know.
You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah. Respect.
Exactly.
What about yourself, Joanna? Did you your Android career is perhaps a little bit more recent than
just
Dan's.
a tad. So I actually just started learning Android about a year or so ago, which goes to show that once you focus on it, it's the only thing you do, you can really pick up a lot. And for me, if I have something that I'm thinking about, or something that I think would make something easier for me, I'll try to code up a really ugly but effective version of it. I'm not really much into how pretty it looks. And so recently I actually made one for testing with some of the videos that we make here at Google. I needed a green screen potential thing, so I could inject my own screen onto what the device was throughout the course of the video. So I just made one that would stay always on and have a green screen coloring, so that we could later inject things onto that. Or I made another one to practice scrolling as a little mini teleprompter, so when I'm at home I can practice that. Realizing now that I'm telling you guys this, I should probably have shared them with the team, but it didn't occur to me.
They sound very useful.
Yes, exactly.
So that's what I do, is I try to play with things whenever I think of something that I could use personally.
Yeah, something which can give you an unfair advantage over your peers.
Yeah, exactly.
That sounds very smart.
Yeah, you take what you get, right?
You have to stand out somehow, right?
Absolutely. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely think there's kind of that intersection of passion and an actual user problem. So some of my first apps were actually my wife's requests.
That's clever.
Because who
She's
else?
going to be very honest in her feedback.
Exactly. And
Honey, I'm spending all this time for you. Okay, literally for you.
exactly. This is all useful. This is and trying to find that one other person or a group of people who are also super passionate about what you're doing and can offer you that kind of feedback. I think is a great way to kind of get started doing Android development, just because like when you're coding in a vacuum, you're like, wow, hey, this is really great. And then you show it to someone else and they're like, you know, it could use a little polish, right? Like we've all been in that situation where a little bit of extra polish doesn't hurt.
Well, the thing is as well, when you're just building it for yourself, you learn to work around the bugs. It's like, oh no, you can't rotate it. You have to first hit the menu option and then slide the thing out before you can come on.
You just never hit that button. Like I just haven't removed it
Why
yet,
would you hit
right?
that button?
But someone else is going to, right? And like, you know, especially before you've actually like published apps to 1 billion devices out there. It may make sense to kind of test with a smaller audience first and kind of get some really good feedback and stuff. So like I think, you know, this whole course kind of gives you a lot of the tools, and we actually talk about this even in the course on kind of doing user research and stuff to try and figure out like, okay, well, is this really a problem? Like how do you actually like talk to users and like get good data back from that? So that's actually part of this course.
Fantastic. Let's move on. We've got another question here. I'd really like to understand performance with the projects in this course. How much do you cover about developing an app to be highly performant? I think this may have come from
seems like a
someone in
planted
Austin.
question.
Yeah, exactly.
Call me campus. Okay, so
he's not here.
the way that we cover perf is there's a whole course actually that's actually been out for a couple of months now that I may or may not have had a hand with. Fortunately, I'm not on screen for that one. And that course really delves into how the tools work, how to read and understand those tools, and how to make small changes in your app in order to, you know, make visible, noticeable improvements with your frame rate. And so what we do in our course is I go over a lot of why performance is important and like why you really need to be nailing it like early on, because if you drop a frame in your frame rate, like that is, if that happens 3 times, like I would uninstall that app, right? Like users have no patience for that. And then I show you what different things look like on tools before and after some changes that we made along the way to show you kind of the trade-offs. So like when we changed the app for material design, we got a lot more overdraw. But that's one of those things where the benefit of those magical moments and that better design is actually worth like one more layer, but you have to watch out for all those red zones. And so there's a lot of considerations. And I don't challenge you to make any code changes as part of Sunshine, as part of the class. It's more like I leave it open-ended challenge with the forum discussion to see what people find in different things. And then I tell you to go to Colt to learn specifics about what kind of improvements to make, because every perf thing is not as simple as like a compile error the way that development is. It's an actual, you have to have conversations with your designers and your marketing and your user groups to see what's most important to your app.
One of the things we do try to do though is avoid kind of the basic performance pitfalls. We try to do as little overdraw as we can. We also try to really eliminate the complexity of our layouts. So you know, we really take we actually talk about grid layout, believe it or not. We also do some very complicated and fun stuff with relative layout in order to avoid actually having this layout depth, which can cause a lot of jank when you're actually running the application. So I think we try to make a balance. Yeah, I mean, one of the things about material design, which is great, is that it's so much more visually rich, but that richness does come at a cost.
It has to render, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nothing comes for free. Would you say when is the right time to start thinking about performance? Is this something that you should be considering right from the beginning?
When you're making your initial decisions, like, will I make this call here, or should that be its own class, or where should this live? You should already be testing early prototypes of it to see, what kind of effects you have. And then the moment that you notice that something's a little bit off, you should be testing theoretically every time you stabilize a change. And then if anything is visually noticeable, that's a clear signal. Like if you can see it, then we've got a big problem. But a lot of the more subtle things are those like death by 1,000 cuts. And so you should just always be thinking about
it's that sense of profiling, right? If you don't know what tools are out there, you don't even know what metrics you need to be keeping track of. That, wow, I added this really cool feature, but my performance is actually horrible now, right? Maybe I should iterate on this a little bit more, right? Rather than getting 20 features in and then realizing, like, wait, something went wrong sometime in the last 20 features.
I built a really, really slick progress bar at one point, which had a times 10 negative impact on how fast the performance was going. But it took 10 times longer, but it looked at least 10 times better.
Right.
So,
right. But at least knowing when that happens, right? Unless you're profiling, unless you know some of the tools that are out there, it's really hard to figure out, like, okay, well, which change did I actually make that caused the problem, right? So unless you're doing it continuously throughout your development. And maybe it's, you have a set of tools you run, and you're like, I look about the same, and you move on, right? It's when you hit those big red flags and you know right away, rather than spending that much more time and then like changing other things that actually have nothing to do with where the problem actually came from.
Yeah.
There is a problem with perf where you try to fix the symptom instead of the actual cause. Like maybe you have some sort of memory issue way down deep in your data layer, but it's showing up as like a missed frame rate with some sort of visual element. So you start changing your design to avoid that element as opposed to fixing your data layer memory leak. So yeah, you have to really be profiling regularly to notice those kinds of things.
So we talk about tools here.
We do.
And tools are really important.
Tools.
Yeah. Well, the tools is going to make it a little easier than just trying to.
At least then you'll know. You'll know.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got another question here. I'm just getting into the online-offline discussion. I think there's in lesson 2, I think that's in lesson 2. And I'm thinking about developing apps for my home country where being offline is the norm. So can you help me understand what I'm going to need to consider?
So this is all about having a data model. Oh, there's kind of a couple of things. First of all, if you're really offline, you have to make sure you have an onboarding experience that actually lets people know that they need a network to start things up. Because if you're expected, people may get the application, may not launch it right away. You want to make sure that at least they have a friendly experience that says, yes, you need to find a network. You need to go and to go for the app to download some initial resources. The second thing, of course, is building a data layer, a model that can cache or synchronize data depending on what kind of app you have. We actually cache data. We do, which is one way, essentially, synchronization with what's going on in our server. So you build a nice data model, make it nice, fast, flexible, make sure the app runs really well when you don't have a network connection available. That's the key thing. It's all about, and then of course making sure that you actually leverage the Android platform to synchronize when you have network again. Especially taking advantage of things like Wi-Fi. Is super important, both in terms of reducing battery life and of course reducing the cost of running your application to the user.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about this even in developing Android apps, the first course. Trying to make sure that all of your data is kind of local on the device, right? Like it's really important that your actual data loading and the actual UI interactions are somewhat decoupled. Because as soon as you couple those things, then a slow network means that you're sitting there staring at your screen like, why won't you like actually show me the weather, right? Like, yes, I could just look outside, but
an uninstall.
This is not what tomorrow is going to be like, right?
Exactly,
and like those are really critical paths where like decoupling those things using sync adapters like we do in Sunshine or GCM Network Manager or Task Job Scheduler. Those are all a lot of tools that are available to Android developers that let you kind of decouple those things and let you load data when there is network, or not having to retry like, is there a network? No, let me waste some battery in an hour checking for a network, right?
You're still camping? Yeah.
There's a lot of tools we could actually give, and Sunshine's actually pretty good about caching everything offline at least. So then you kind of have one data model, at least as an example of like saying, well, all right, this app does actually work offline. Like I can actually use the widget and use Sunshine, even if I don't have a network connection after that initial load.
Yeah. It's pretty funny in Sunshine itself, like just playing with the application. Turn the network off, launch Sunshine, go and change your city, see what happens, and then turn the network on and watch as the sync adapter goes, oh, we now have network available, boom, it syncs instantaneously. It's really fun to do in the emulator if you've got really fast network access.
The only thing is you need some graceful failures built in. One of the first bugs that we made Dan fix was the fact that if you don't have internet when you open the app, it's just a blank screen. It's like you have no way of knowing that it's because there's no Wi-Fi, and it's actually because you might think that the app isn't loading, or like something went wrong, or maybe your phone is freezing up.
Yeah, that's what I was going to when I was talking about onboarding. There's two different kinds of onboarding. There's like onboarding where you get a nice beautiful wizard, and then there's just simply you load the app for the first time.
Go to the internet.
And what's going to happen? What does the user see? And in the original version of Sunshine, one of the reasons why it was really not finished was that we showed you absolutely nothing. If you were a user using that app for the first time and you had downloaded it off of something like Google Play, you might have just given it a 1-star right there, not realizing that there was actually a somewhat rich application underneath.
It had a really pretty action bar.
The logo was nice.
The logo was very nice.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, I think that's one of the big challenges when you're talking online, offline, is that as developers, we tend to not go through the entire cycle, or it's like you have the app and then you turn off the network. Does it work? What happens when I press buttons? But there's the onboarding. What happens if it starts to download the stuff and then it loses internet access, or you're halfway through a screen transition? Like, there's all of these different edge cases and failure modes, which you kind of have to take into account, because most people aren't using their app sitting at their desk, surrounded by more Wi-Fi signals.
Silicon
It's
Valley
probably
Wi-Fi.
Good one. Okay, so we have another question here about what to do next. So I finished Android Fundamentals. What about other resources are there outside of the course if I need a little bit more background?
All right, this is our job, you guys. This is what we do when we're not building Udacity courses.
You get to plug us.
So we have the other Udacity courses that we already mentioned. We have tons of samples and documentation and really great videos that are super awesome and informative and have cool slides behind us online, and those are all under our Google developers things. We have people who hang out on Stack Overflow trying to answer questions when you encounter bugs or errors, or you just want a little bit of help. We've been building up these great communities for years that can also help you and share their OSS, other work that they've been doing themselves. What have I forgotten? We have code labs. We come to conferences.
Don't forget our blog posts.
We have blog posts. We're on Medium.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
We may or may not be on Vine.
Yeah, we're still discussing that.
And
9 seconds of
the
development
point
knowledge.
is that we have worked really hard to make an entire community and ecosystem full of content and information, so that it's not just us that are trying to help, but other people who have learned from their own experiences can chime in. But whenever new features come out, we are one of those first resources. We are out there trying to explain, runtime permissions for the M preview that's out right now. And that's what we do, and we do that because we're really passionate. So I think that if you have any questions, just type your question into a search bar of your favorite choice and see what comes up.
Well, that's the thing. It's like none of us are hard people to get in contact with, right? So if all else fails, you can always ping something at us one way or another.
I'll usually.
He answers one-on-one all the time.
Now you're going to have even more opportunity.
Yeah.
Reto wrote a book. You can go back and read Reto's book.
He has a whole book. Just read his book.
It's only a little bit out of date.
Yeah.
A little bit. Moving on rapidly. We have a question here. How much time will it take me to build the course project in the course? I want to build something I can show people on my team. So someone obviously interested in getting started, wants to have something to show. How long is it going to go through and build Sunshine and some of the other things which are included within the course? And I'll even go further and say the nano degree.
Yeah, so when you talk about course project, the Sunshine really isn't the course project. Sunshine is a learning tool. It is an app. There's no question about it. And it will take you, I don't know, to get through the first 2 courses. We're talking about, I think, 10 weeks or so, 10 or 11 weeks of what we expect most people would take to get through it. When it comes to building the projects, a lot of that is up to how absolutely detail-oriented focused you are. I mean, you can build a basic version of the projects actually pretty quickly in a matter of weeks, but you can also go crazy, and that's what's fun about it. If you want to build something that has brilliant latest design patterns, many of which you have to code yourself, it could take you longer. And it really, I think at that point, if what you're doing is want to show it to your coworkers as an example of material design, you're probably talking about a longer cycle time. We spent a lot of time just materializing Sunshine, an application that already existed. When you talk about going from building an app from scratch to that, it can be a pretty long endeavor, but I think it's worth it. I think that it all depends on what your final goal is.
Yeah, and some of it depends on certainly how much knowledge you already have, right? If you've been building Android apps for a little bit or on the side, right, you're gonna have a lot easier time kind of getting started and getting through projects than if you're coming in with just basic Java knowledge, right? Sure, there's maybe a little bit more ramp up time there. It's a big SDK. There's a lot out there, right? And we're trying to at least tell you kind of where to start and stuff. So hopefully that'll be an easy transition, but at the same point, a lot of it really depends on kind of where you're starting at. So
the other thing is that it's self-paced, right? So it's as quickly as you want to rush through it, as slowly as you want to move through looking at every single thing. The other thing is that if we don't hide any information. Like, you don't have to finish something or get a quiz correct in order to see the next step. Like, everything is out right now in GitHub commits that have been structured really carefully, so it's an easy follow along learning tool. So if you get to a lesson that's just not interesting to you or not relevant to the kind of work that you want to do, like if you have nothing to do with data layers and you want to skip that, or if you're not the design person, you built the whole backend, like, you can skip that if you want. Like, it's only your education that you're affecting. It's like, you can pick and choose the parts that are right for you, so you can focus really hard on the ones that you care about, rush through or skip some of the other ones. You can, download halfway through the class to show off what the app looks like at that point. Kind of do all of that work.
Yeah, if you're not interested in actually taking the nano degree, all the materials are all available for any use. I mean, that's one of the things that's really exciting, is that these materials are all free. You can they're all up, and available. You can use them if you want. If you're teaching a physical class, you can use them. I mean, if you're in a classroom setting, they're there to make for whatever purpose that you find useful. And I think that's kind of exciting. But yeah, if you're taking the actual class, the projects have structure and they involve doing various things.
And you'll get graded and stuff.
And you get graded. So those, so it's sort of like, as it's a resource, you can pick and choose to work through it. But also the classes themselves actually do have structure, because we're at the end of it, we're saying, hey, you guys are Android developers now, and so we want to make sure you've gotten through all this material.
You know all the things
Yeah,
you're supposed to know.
No, I was gonna say, you don't know all the things.
Many of the things.
Yeah,
you know all the
Good
things
number.
Yeah.
needed
Good healthy
number.
number.
for a nano degree.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of it has to do with like either what exactly you're trying to build, and also where you come from. Not just how much Java or Android experience, but if you've been developing mobile apps on any platform for years, then you've got a massive head start in terms of understanding what it's like to build and design on these sorts of platforms.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I was first learning Android from a Java background, I was really confused by the framework. Like, I called a method. Why did that method not immediately get invoked and return to where I was? Like, I don't understand what this framework is doing.
Yeah.
And so if you have any kind of knowledge from any kind of thing, that'll help you skip ahead on that moment.
Yeah, well, 1.5 speed is totally acceptable.
Yeah,
but
okay.
Absolutely.
if
And
you
I
can
thought a lot
let- if
better on
you-
my 5 speed, actually.
Well, that's how you normally speak. We
Yeah,
slow you
we
down.
just-
And we actually have slowed, yeah.
Okay. Good question here about testing. What do you do in this course to teach how to test Android applications? Are there any other places that you can recommend that you can learn how to better test your applications? I assume testing is completely covered, every method
Yeah,
line,
we're so
complete code
detailed.
coverage.
So I would say that we show you how to write JUnit tests in Android. We show you how to execute JUnit tests in Android. We do not have a comprehensive set of JUnit tests even for Sunshine. Partially because it wasn't, I would say, the focus of this course was testing, but I think we have a really good start at a series of tests on the data layer that makes some sense. Some of the tests we have are actually tests to help you write the class. So they're tests that in the real world you probably wouldn't even want, because they're sort of change detector tests. Because we're trying to make sure you actually end up with the thing we were intending you to build. In the real world, that's not. You normally wouldn't do that in a test. Normally, your goal is to make sure does this actually work. And so I would say we're not, even the tests we have are not necessary. They do show you how to write a basic JUnit test, how to execute them, and how to get that unit testing started. What we have done is we've built some great new testing frameworks for Android that I think are super important, and we've also really integrated those well into Android Studio. And so I think there is sort of a need for another section or another course just about testing Android apps.
I believe another course has been discussed.
So,
So keep your eyes
Yeah,
peeled for
exactly.
the future.
Excellent. Speaking of, there's another question here which wants to know, is there any chance that you'll make a course or add a chapter to a pre-existing course focused on Google Play services?
Okay, so
The answer is yes.
Google Cloud Messaging actually lives within the Google Play Services suite, but it doesn't go through all of the like the sign-in and authorization flows that you would normally use. And then I just finished adding another follow-up lesson on the Places API, so you can see how to access location services and how to build out a slightly different approach to using the Google services. And then those are kind of teasers. So if you want the really deep deep diving into like how authorization and sign-in works, as well as a couple of our other offerings in that suite. We have a whole other course for you that's been built by our good friends, and so that one's actually constantly evolving. They're really like adding on and then changing things as Google Play Services changes, because it does change more often than the Android operating system does. So once you finish ours, or even if you hate us, that's fine too. You can just go take that one and
really
see it and like
ours
see how that one changes over time as well.
Yeah, Magnus, the head of Google Play Services,
got
rocks.
a lot of
is
enthusiasm.
has done an amazing job along with Lawrence and a few of the other people in that class. So it should be a great class.
Absolutely. All right, we have, I think, one more question, and then I think we've gone a little bit over just so that we could account for some of the technical difficulties at the beginning. Sure. But I think we have one more question, and then we can wrap up. It's a simple one. Does the course handle offline database syncing?
No, we do not sync. And I'm being a little bit obtuse there, because we do one-way sync. When I think of synchronization, I think of two. When I think of synchronization, I think of two-way. We cache something that comes in from the server. We don't try to maintain that data in any kind of way. We don't actually even go through and try to do kind of clever things with the database to make sure we're only touching records that have changed. We're truly taking what's on the server and caching it, for use later on in the app.
Largely because we don't have a backend.
Right,
I built a
an
really pretty
Android.
fake one.
What kind of
we
a
don't
fake backend
actually
is this?
have a backend.
Right.
So it's kind of hard to like discuss the two-way syncing layer when all we have is just the app, because that was our focus.
It's important to realize that the class is focused on Android development, right?
Yeah.
So while we do a lot of stuff with syncing data down and keeping that for offline usage, it is very much on the Android side of things, right? So we're going to focus on the client side and what you can do there. There's certainly a lot you can do to really make that easy, but again, it requires a lot of back-end knowledge, which isn't necessarily the focus.
I mean, I think some of our most heated discussions when we were developing the class were, do we make someone write a back end? And it always was, and it always came down to that it wasn't the focus of this class. There is another great class that should be there. That's how to write a great back end for an Android application. But that's not what this class is. This is actually developing the thing you put onto Android, working against either an existing back end or one that perhaps another team is creating, or perhaps you're creating based on knowledge from another class.
Sure.
But that's not, we didn't want to get too far off into the weeds. We wanted to really get you focused on Android development.
Well, I mean, this isn't a short course as it is, right? You're not finishing this over the weekend, so it probably makes sense to try and keep a little bit of focus.
I mean, maybe if you're popping Red Bulls or something like that. But,
a lot of Red Bulls.
a lot of rock stars.
Yeah.
We actually had a good number of arguments here about how this backend thing should be solved when we tried to do something like Google Cloud Messaging. And it came down to me saying no a lot, and not because I didn't want to do it, but because everything that we came up with as a potential solution would have made the class really convoluted, right? And if we can't effectively teach, then we're not doing our job, and it makes it that much harder for them to learn. And we don't want anyone dropping off halfway through because they're confused. So that being said, as you're going through the course, please ask your questions in the forum. Like, let us know where moments you are lost or confused, so that our community and also ourselves can help you or like update the course in the future.
Yeah, we're constantly looking at all that feedback that comes in, making updates to the course, adding new instructor notes.
Going back and redoing a couple of lessons in the first course.
Exactly. I mean, we took a lot of feedback from the first course, and not only took advantage of the updates to Android Studio that have been made and the fact that we had come out with Android L, but also just said, look, these things were hard, these things were unintuitive. Let's try to simplify it. Let's try to make it a better flow for students, and the feedback has been really positive with that. So we're, all of these things are constantly things in development. There's no instructor who makes a class and then leaves it there and says, I've created perfection. It's all about iterating, and I think that we're going to continue to make all of these better.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all very much for your time. Thank you all for joining us for Ask the Experts, the Advanced Android App Development Edition. Please go ahead. If you haven't already started doing the course, please go to Udacity, start the course. If you have any questions, we try and appear on the forums to answer questions for you there. Obviously, there's a community of other students which are all involved as well. Otherwise, as Joanna says, we are all over the internet trying to help you guys be better Android developers. So thank you and enjoy the course.